treat your pop-up like a brick and mortar when it comes to the brand.
Yes, exactly.
Just because you're not an official restaurant, like you don't have the brick and mortar, does not mean you're not a business.
Yeah, you're still a business.
So have that digital storefront.
We opened with $280 in our bank account the first night and a dream and hopes that we'd be busy.
This episode brought to you by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, chef owner of Little Bear, Jarrett Stieber. Jerrett, are you feeling unstoppable today?
Despite the restaurant industry's best attempts, yes, I am.
Yeah, I love it, man. A great way to get this thing started. And I'm looking forward to your success quarter mantra. What do you got for us today?
Trust your gut.
Trust your
Trust
gut.
your gut.
Why is that where we're going today? Why we're starting off?
Well, I've kind of always followed my gut with where I wanted to work. I trusted my gut when I was 15 and thought it would be a good idea to get into this industry, and I've kind of trusted it ever since about where to work. I had no idea what I was doing when I started my own business either, but figured I would just go ahead and trust my gut the whole time and try to make the right decisions and things that felt like they were good and natural to me and fit sort of a guiding principle set of ethics, and so far it's worked. So
yeah, I think people don't realize that that gut feeling is actually your brain.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we think, oh, don't trust. I mean, no, like that's the low road of your brain. It's tied to our organs. We feel like it's just like like the more primal part of us. That's the subconscious that's paying attention to all this little data, and it's getting stored away in the background, and it's communicating to us, and it's telling us, no, based off of my years of experience, paying attention, this does not feel like a good thing, or this does feel like a good thing. Trust it. What's going through your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think like you, for the majority of decisions, you really make them almost immediately, but sort of talk yourself out of things, or go the roundabout way of taking extra time to think through things sometimes. But usually you've kind of immediately made the decision, and it's just a matter of whether you kind of admit it to yourself or not quickly.
There's this idea of professionalism. Like I think there's a good balance to be found, like where you want to respect the people you work for, you want to show up to do your job, but you can also be yourself personality-wise, right? Yeah,
that's exactly right. And in a restaurant, that's kind of a hard balance to find in some ways, but it is part of it. Like if you stayed out really late after a shift one night and you're out drinking or whatever that young cooks do, you still got to show up on time for your shift the next day. And if you're hungover, you just sweat it out during the shift and you figure it out. Like that's part of the professionalism, not, being rude and sexist and bigoted and all that kind of stuff to your coworkers. Like learning how to get along with people from all walks of life. There's some people, like I was a 15-year-old kid from a upper middle class suburb working in kitchens with a Guatemalan dude who was sending all of his paycheck back to his family, and trying to scratch a living that way and everything in between. So you have to learn to get along and find a middle ground, and I think it's important life skills in a lot of ways.
What advice would you have had for yourself, knowing who you are today, going back? Like, what advice would you give yourself?
I wouldn't have done anything differently. I feel like that job should have been mine, and even if it shouldn't have been, just feeling like it should have been yours and not getting it, it's hard to overcome that. So everything has an expiration date, and you have to be aware of when it occurs. But from my perspective now as a proprietor, I wouldn't have done that. I would have promoted myself if I'd been.
What's your rationality for that?
Because it's about showing the team that you believe in them. Like you can't get the most out of your staff if you don't enable them to feel empowered. So
I can get behind that.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's kind of like you've been here, you deserve this. Like when you bring somebody from outside, like I feel like the only reason to really do that is if you need to like send a message to the staff. To an extent, it's almost like a sports coach like benching one of the better players during a losing streak or something to like break bad habits. Like I feel like it's kind of a big shakeup. So it's usually like something's not working, the flow's not right, the structure's not right, everyone's complacent, whatever. Like I'm bringing in a manager from outside, some fresh blood, doesn't know any of you, doesn't give a shit, he's not your friend, he's just here to run it or whatever. And like that's kind of why you do that. But I would much rather just be like, hey, you've worked with me for a while, like just for the loyalty alone you should get this job, and we can work on making you what the position needs if you're not there immediately. I mean, one thing I will be a little more firm on is like if you have not spent your career working in restaurants, or at the very least a large chunk of your working life working in restaurants, you should not open a restaurant because you're the assholes that have 98% of your restaurants closed and makes it hard for the people like us who do know what we're doing to get money to open restaurants.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that statement. That's honestly what I would tell somebody to do. However, I do interview a lot of people. I'm always surprised at how many people get into this industry with zero experience and crush it. And I think that's because they don't have any of the bad habits that the restaurant industry has.
Yeah,
the
restaurant industry has people to run it too.
Yeah, and the restaurant industry does have a lot of bad habits as far as like we've been like basically cookie cutting the 1905 restaurant model. You know what I mean? And it's just like, wait, we live in 2022 now. Like we have resources available to us, like the internet. Like our market is the world, not just what we can fit inside our restaurant. So they spin the model upside down, and it usually comes from people that come outside of the industry because they go, why can't I do it like this?
Yeah.
You know? So I'm always surprised at the same time.
And then there's
but
also,
I do agree with you with what you're saying.
There's the counter side of it, are the people who come from like a very straightforward business background who don't realize like just the perishable nature of restaurant product creates a whole different set of problems of like when you're not busy, and let's say like Apple has a slow week at the Lenox Mall Atlanta location. The iPads aren't going to go rotten. Like you could just sell the ones you didn't sell this week next week. But in a restaurant, you not only didn't sell what you brought in, you then have to buy more of it next week because it all went bad.
I think you might hold a world record for world's longest sustained pop-up. 7 years.
Very possible.
Because 2013, even with my podcast, I started in like 2012, or 2013 was the first. Was it 2014? I think it might have been 2014. That's around the time I started.
Yeah.
And I didn't. This wasn't even on my radar. And I was talking and interviewing people. Like you're like ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
With pop-ups.
I didn't want it to last 7 years.
And you went until 2020.
Yeah.
But that's like the longest I've heard. But at the same time, it gave you the tools, the resources. The thing we haven't talked about yet is developing a brand with a pop-up, which is, I think, the most valuable part of a pop-up. You're shaking your head.
Yeah.
What, do you agree with that?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, it's like personality based, I think. So the brand sort of became like largely an extension of our personality, that we were like very irreverent and just kind of did whatever the fuck we wanted, like wrote funny menus and like, put jokes on things and just kind of tried to like take the pretense out of fine dining without taking the skill set away from it, And that was a big part of why people fell in love with the pop-up, and in turn why people appreciate Little Bear now, I think, is that it's like there's just not a lot of places like it where it's like we take ourselves extremely seriously in terms of prep and what we offer and sourcing interesting wine and whatever, but we don't take ourselves that seriously with, like there's restaurants that like name dishes where it's like exploration of the sea, and you're just like, Jesus Christ, like I hope you like just fall into the sea and never come back. And that's like the mindset that we have here is like, come on, like it's just food. And treat your pop-up like a brick and mortar when it comes to the brand. Yes, exactly.
Just because you're not an official restaurant, like you don't have the brick and mortar, does not mean you're not a business.
Yeah, you're still a business.
So have that digital storefront.
The reason the pop-up lasted for 7 years was because I spent 6 of them like planning the restaurant, trying to find a space, trying to find funding. Yeah. And it just, took a while, as it does. I was very stubborn about the investors I wanted, needed the money, but I also didn't want to sacrifice the deal to get the money. It still had to be friendly to the restaurant ultimately, because we can't survive if we're shackled by our investors and by the deal that we're under. And then finding the right space was hard because a lot of restaurants in Atlanta are very large, and I wanted to have a small one, which is unique for Atlanta. There's more small ones now, but when I opened the place and when I was planning for it, there weren't any. Like even now, people will look at a 70 or 80 seat restaurant here and be like, oh, it's a small restaurant. It's like, no, it's not. It's a medium to large size restaurant. Yeah. So finding the right space was tough. And I wanted an old building, which Atlanta is like knocking every old building down and putting up the same cookie cutter developments everywhere, which sucks, but it's what it is. So I wanted to be part of saving an old building and fixing it up. So, it took a while. But yeah, I mean, the pop-up, every meal, every guest, that was like, this is somebody who might remember us and come to the restaurant when it opens. And, that helped us because we, timing wise, once the build out was done, we opened February 26th of 2020. So we literally had like 2 weeks before the state of emergency for COVID was declared. And it worked because we were packed for the first 2 weeks with reservations because we had 7 years of building a customer base. And I don't pay for PR or anything like that. We do everything word of mouth, free social media, which like I'm the asshole behind the Instagram. Like it's me. And that's part of the brand, you know, but it was, you know, we worked it. We like used our contacts with media. Like I've never paid for advertising. I've never comped meals for critics. It was just like, when the time comes, I will ask for, you know, hey, we're opening this restaurant. Will you promote it? And it's like, I don't know what a fucking media release is supposed to look like or not. I just know, like, I'm going to send you an email and be like, here's some details. We're opening the restaurant. Like, you're all looking for content. Here's some content. Feel free to use it. And so we were busy the first couple weeks. We opened with $280 in our bank account the first night and a dream and hoped that we'd be busy. And thankfully we were, and had, you know, maybe $1,200 or $1,500 of profit after the first 2 weeks, and saw the writing on the wall with, you know, we're going to have to do takeout only. And unlike most other restaurants that had years of operating and were like, this will last a couple weeks, we'll just close and wait it out. We're like, we don't have that option.
Yeah, I just spent all my money on building out a restaurant.
Yeah, so it was just like, I'm going to have to take a chance right now and take this little bit of money that we made and use it to buy takeout supplies. Because if we are going to be busy with takeout, we need to have the product on hand to put the food in to sell enough to make sense.
Yeah.
So I bought as much as I could that first week and was like, let's hope we're busy. And then thankfully we were busy with takeout for a few months.
What is your biggest challenge today?
Wednesday and Thursday before 7 p.m. dinner reservations.
How are you overcoming it?
Honestly, I try to guilt people on social media a little bit more every now and again and just be like, if you don't ever eat on non-weekend nights before 7 o'clock, explain yourself to me.
What is one book that's a must read?